On today's episode, we talked about unclaimed remains. We talked
did.
about how to deal with them, what kind of situations may or may not occur with unclaimed remains.
And we went ahead and answered some of the questions that you beautiful people left us.
Let's talk about death, baby. Let's talk about grief and mourning. Is it argumental or existential? What's it mean to me? Let's talk about death.
Hi, I'm Benny Capal, and I'm a funeral professional.
And I'm Nicholas Capal, a psychologist.
Hey, Nick, let's talk about death.
Welcome back to Let's Talk About Death.
Today we're going to talk about unclaimed remains, Nick.
Kind of rhymes, doesn't it?
You did. I don't know how I said it. I'm a poet, and I don't even know it. You know, it's one of those things.
Nope.
All right, so let's talk about unclaimed remains. So first of all, for anybody who doesn't know what unclaimed remains are legitimately either, think of like Jane and Joe. What is it? No, Jane and...
Why Jane and Joe?
It's what their names are, isn't it? John and Jane
I've
Doe.
never-
That's what they're officially are called. Yeah,
They're officially.
it's people who they don't have, either they don't know who they are, they have no like identification on them, or they can't like use the teeth, or I don't know how they do that. That's not part of my job. Or it's people who literally have no family left that can claim the body, or, which we'll go into a little bit, people who do have people, but they won't either sign the bill on it, or they won't come out of their way for this
Estranged
situation.
family members.
And we'll talk about that because I think a lot of people are probably more wanting to hear about that than anything else. But we'll start first with John and Jane Doe. So we're talking about people who have no identification. I don't want to say this is every time, but we're talking like homeless people that usually that they die, and they're taken to the medical examiner's office, and there's just no family to contact. Either they don't know where the family is, which is sometimes a problem, or there is nobody left. Mm-hmm. These people had no family, no brothers, in at least where they could find. Now, this does happen even with Dad and I occasionally. Like, we'll have somebody and we need to find the siblings because of cremation, which I think we talked about already in another episode. If we haven't, check out the cremation episode. But when it comes to cremation, sometimes we have to find all the children. And sometimes they have two or three that are either estranged, or they don't live in the area and they don't just know where their brothers or sisters live. Mm-hmm. Some people just don't have that knowledge. So we have to get the police involved, and they scour the area basically to see if they can find where their siblings are. They go in their database, all that. So first thing happens is, what do we do with unclaimed remains? Now, I don't know specifically for every state or every county, but I do know in our area what happens is they go to the medical examiner's office, and at the end of the year, they actually do, after so many calls, and they have to, there's a protocol, they have to at least wait so long. They do they have the bodies cremated, and they do a mass burial of all the unclaimed bodies.
They do?
They do.
Like a do-do?
So, and that happens. That's one thing that happens. Another thing that happens is if they can get the family to come in, some people just don't have money. So the other option is they just have to come in, clarify who this person is. They sign off on it and they leave. And then basically the county takes care of the bill at that point. That's another thing that happens. Now, when it comes to funeral homes, we don't really, especially in Ida, I'm going to speak for me personally, we have never had 100% of an unclaimed situation. We've had people that don't have family members, but they usually have at least somebody, either a relative or a close friend or a lawyer in that situation, come and they take care of the signing and the finances and all that.
So let's say you have someone who passes away. Maybe they're listening right now, don't have any family members, or people that would, take care of them if they were to pass away. What advice would you give them?
Oh, absolutely. We have, and this just happened a couple of years ago because of the situation of cremation, which we delved into, but in Michigan, if the spouse is not alive or doesn't exist anymore, the children, or never existed, the children then have to have a majority signed to be cremated.
But what if
sometimes
there's no
hold on, I'm getting
no.
there.
I think what I'm asking you is, let's say that you don't have anybody.
That's what I'm getting at. I'm getting at. There is a legal document now called the funeral representative. You can come into your local funeral home and sign a paper giving one person 100% rights of you through the funeral or cremation process. That's it. They don't control your funds. They don't control your health. Nothing else except what happens to your remains after you're done.
Yeah, but
after
can you pre-need yourself? Like if you were
yeah,
the only
so
family
basically
member?
you can come in, you can set up the pre-need, and then you sign this paperwork saying this is the person that I want to be my funeral representative. They have to sign it. I think you have to have 3 notaries sign it.
Okay.
So they have to know that they're being that person. They have to sign off themselves. Right. You have to sign off. You have to be sane of mind, obviously. You have to sign off on it that person's going to do it. You get the notaries, and that 100%, that's the only person that can do it. So it doesn't matter if you have children, doesn't matter if you have a spouse. If you sign all that paperwork, that person is legally your funeral representative. Now, this is yet again Michigan. I don't know if it's every state.
So I guess what I'm asking you is, let's say
you have nobody. You would have to make somebody
say
your funeral representative.
I'm Jim. Mm-hmm. I have no brothers and sisters. I have no kids. There's no relative around me. Like there's no relative
cousins.
No.
Okay.
Can I come in and just do pre-need my own and pay for it up front and not have to worry about any of this?
Yeah, in theory, yes.
That's what I was.
But somebody still has to sign the bill because you can't sign the bill. You might have the money already made here, but somebody has to.
Why can't you sign the bill, pre-need it?
Because that signature becomes null and void when you're dead. Just like you can't sign a contract after you're dead for a car. It doesn't exist anymore. So yeah, you could put down the money. You can have it pre-needed.
But you still have to have
everything will, in theory, be done. But you still have to have somebody come in and sign that
That's
bill.
what I guess,
so
clarifying
yet again,
for the viewers. You need someone alive.
So if you don't have somebody go into your local funeral home, they'll have a specific, for Michigan, like I said, they have a funeral representative. That's what they'll have you take. You sign it, you have it notarized, you let the person know. Obviously, they have to be around because you can't have a notary without that. And you bring it back to your funeral home, kabam, they put it in the file, then that's who they contact. That's it. That's the whole chicken caboodle. And that was made for conflicting families or, perfect example, the person that doesn't have anybody.
One last time, what was that document called?
Funeral representative.
Beautiful.
And it's a paper you can get at any Michigan funeral home. Like I said, I'm not in cahoots with other states, so I have no idea what they
No, we're good.
What they do,
but states probably have similar
other
stuff.
Funeral directors listening to this, if you're from another state, please send in any information to me, and I'll make sure it gets put in the comments
attach it.
or
Absolutely.
something of sorts.
But if you don't know your state's rules, go in and talk to your local funeral director.
Absolutely. Another thing to think about too, Nick. Now, some funeral homes have different rules when it comes to payments and all that. Yet again, I'm coming from a small town funeral director. We understand that you really can't do much, especially when you're relying on a life insurance policy. Mm-hmm. That sometimes could be 30 days after the death occurs or when you get the death certificate, which is that's a whole different episode talking about the death certificate, what you need it for, what you should start looking into. We'll talk about that later.
Let's pause that and we'll put it away for another episode.
We'll put it in the back pocket. But we are legally required as a funeral director, as a funeral home establishment, if you have a cremation through us, if you do not come and pick up your loved one after so many days and we have to keep those remains. That's an old law that was stated. So there's some funeral homes, obviously in bigger cities, that have rooms full of cremains that, the son didn't want to come back and get them or didn't know what to do with them or didn't care, or they just never came in and paid.
Does your funeral home hold remains?
No, we do not. We are, like I said, luckily, Dad and I are in a very small town funeral home where everybody knows everybody, and B, we just never had that situation occur. Not that it won't happen. I'm literally knocking on wood as we speak. But Dad and I have families sign another contract saying that if after so many days, so much time, and we've tried to contact you a billion times. Like I said, this has never happened, so we never had to go this far. You're giving us right that we can do our own burial of the cremains,
which you would
respectfully, which we would bite and take care of ourselves because we have an obligation to the dead to take care of them respectfully. Mm-hmm. Now, that is something that we decided to do as a funeral home. It's not necessarily every funeral home does it or has something like that, but we're just saying after so many calls, you don't come, we don't want to keep it. We don't want to hold responsibility.
We don't want to
something
keep
happened.
grandma in
We
the
have a
corner.
burn. The funeral home burns down. Those cremains are gone.
It's very unprofessional. Yeah, I get
So
it.
we're gonna, and we'll let you know. We'll make sure we have the grave mapped out. So if a family member did ever come in, this is where you can find it. And if you want to move them, we'll help you go through that process.
Right.
But unclaimed remains mostly are, like I said, there's some funeral homes that have rooms full.
So we talked about like people that can't afford it or people that don't have families, right?
Right.
But let's talk about like family members that just don't want to come back and get the remains.
So I've had this with everything, with traditional and with cremated, where a son just wants nothing to do with it. Wants absolutely nothing to do with it. Like I said, in our situation here at the funeral home, there's always another sibling or another son or somebody else that's like, oh, absolutely, I'll take care of this. Don't worry about. But there is funeral homes that have that problem where I don't want to sign off on it because if I sign off that's that person, now I have to pay for that bill. So there's people that dodge the police, they dodge the funeral home, they never go in and, especially even at the medical examiners, like they have to have a family member come in, they open, you see it all the time on movies. It has nothing like it, but they have to, that is my dad. This is my son. This is.
So you bring up the point that they're dodging financial responsibility.
Mostly they're dodging finances, but they could also be dodging. They just don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, that's what
they didn't like their dad. Why would I care what happens to him?
I was even going deeper than that. Like I just don't
like
want,
to spite him.
No,
spite her.
I don't know if I can come grab mom.
Oh, you're saying the emotional.
Yeah, like
I would
what
think
about like psychologically, like it's just the finality of it at that point.
Absolutely.
Like that's real.
Absolutely.
Right.
And this is what we're trying to.
If you think about immediate cremation, right? Maybe the person comes in, signs the paper,
Okay.
but hasn't even seen dad or mom
Right.
since they passed.
Gotcha.
So then the question becomes, this is the final moment. This is the reality that this is mom and she died. Maybe they can't take that in.
Can't process the
So if I don't get mom, she never really died.
In our situation, like I said, though,
this is an extreme case.
No.
I'm
But like I
just
said,
saying-
in our situation, because you're bringing up Kapal Funeral Home, they would have signed that paper that says after 90 days and after so many calls, if you don't come.
But I'm asking you as a professional dealing with grief and loss, how do you reach out to these people? Like, how do you call them and say, oh, by the way, grandma is still here. Like, is someone going to come get her?
Well, that's interesting.
How do you be
too.
professional, but yet
That's interesting too,
caring,
because
right?
I've had some families, they hate the term cremains.
but they want their parent cremated?
Correct. Also, I've heard people that say, don't say my mom's name because that's not her anymore. That's just ashes.
Ooh.
So as a funeral professional, and you don't want to catch them off guard, right? You kind of listen. Yet again, it's kind of like you probably do this too. You play the room, right?
Well,
when they come
label.
in, they'll say something.
Yes.
Usually, like, okay, so mom's going to be cremated. At that point, they have no problem saying the word cremate.
Yeah.
And cremains is just the version of remains.
My question
Cremated.
is to you. Let's go deeper than that. Why do you think some people can't say the word cremated?
Because I think it's because
They don't like
for
the
them.
idea
They
that
don't
they
like
got
the idea
cremated?
that their mom is being called or dad being called ashes at that point. So they would rather me call them their name, where the other family would rather me say cremains because that's not their mom anymore. Do you see what I'm saying? Some people just like you
So
know.
this is a label. This is like definition at that point.
But you've seen that at people when they have like at their house, they'll have the urn, right? And they'll point and they'll say, "There's mom's remains,"
Yeah.
or they'll say,
that's mom.
That's mom."
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? There's the association
Yeah,
and disassociation to both. So as a funeral director, it's very tough because you don't want to offend them, right?
Right.
But you also want to be honest with them.
Why is that? Where is the disconnect? Is it the disconnect that can't be mom because she's ashes?
Or maybe that was their mom's wishes, but not theirs, and they're struggling with it. You know what I mean? They didn't want mom to be cremated.
Do you see a lot of families that'll say that to you? Like, I know this is what mom wanted, but I don't want this.
Yes. Or this is what my husband wanted, but I don't want this.
How do you comfort them?
Dan and I always have felt this way, and maybe some funeral directors don't. People, when they're living, they struggle with the idea that a funeral is not for them. Yes, it's them. They're in the casket or they're cremated. It's for everybody else. People have this, I want to make this as easy for my family and my wife. So cremation is a faster way to go through the grieving, and it's, in their mind, cheaper. Not always, because what I find with some families that go through cremation, they want everything else. They want the thumbprints that are gold. They want... So it actually, their
Price.
bill ends up being very close to if they would have had a traditional with a cremation after, or et cetera, et cetera. But what it comes down to is, so in that situation, we say, realize that person is gone. We would all like to think that person wants you to be able to go through your grieving process the way you want to go through your grieving process.
Okay.
Yes. Was the reason why your loved one said they wanted to be cremated because they didn't want you to pay money?
Or
And for you, is the funeral more valuable to you emotionally? And yes, you'll pay a little bit more. That's the honest.
Is that going to help you?
Correct. Get through the process.
So, yeah, that's a great question. But have you ever had someone that did change it?
Yes.
And then tell you, thank
Yes.
you.
Yes.
You know, like
we've had.
I never really thought that I actually had the opportunity to do that.
I don't think I would have been okay if we would have went the other way, is what they say.
Have you ever had the opposite honesty?
No,
So
we've
with
never had a
originally-
negative thing other than we did something different than they wanted. But they'll say it as in, but we got through this a lot better.
Okay.
Me and my kids, or my brother and I.
Right.
But Nick, yeah, absolutely. And there was a lot of families that, nope, that's what Dad wanted. We didn't like that, but that's what Dad wanted. That's what we're going to do. But there's ways that you can mix the two, which is, we're kind of going into a whole different stream here. You know, you could still get Dad could be still cremated, but you could still have a service for you guys.
But again, this is where I think one of the big things that not only the show is so important, but one thing that I hope to do in my lifespan is educate.
Oh, absolutely.
People don't know this.
You don't
People
have-
are not
it's-
educated on what their options
Oh, absolutely.
are.
That's-
yeah, I mean, people do know cremation, they know burial, right? You could make those
right,
comments.
but you don't have. It doesn't have to be a direct cremation. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to do. It's not.
It doesn't
it's
have to be a
full
2-day
this or
visitation
full
and
that.
2
You can
burial.
mix and
That's-
match some of this.
Absolutely.
You could still have the funeral for somebody else. You could have a private memorial service, so you don't have to have other people.
You can have the new holograms if you can afford
That's
that.
it.
Right?
That's an interesting topic.
C3PO.
But going to Unclaimed Remains, because we really went off topic here. Unclaimed Remains. That's
Thank you,
what,
Ben, for
that's
bringing
what
us
we
back.
do. That's how they are. That's how they've been dealt with before. It is an issue. It always will be an issue. But there are legally ways that have been taken care of, especially with the medical examiners in your counties, and there is money that are in the budgets basically to take care of that situation.
So let's say, you know, we hear stories all the time of like wife and husband dying within the same month of themselves.
Okay.
So let's say mom died and she was supposed to pick up dad.
Right.
So then what?
That would be the person who's in control of mom.
Okay.
It's just like everything else. It goes down succession.
Right, because in all, this sounds so bad, but there is like this idea that once you die, you're a possession at that point.
That's it. So think about it that way. So if the wife dies, then it's the children again. So we
Son.
go back into that issue. And usually what happens is the one that's signing the bill usually wants control of everything.
Right, absolutely.
And usually the kids are like, yeah, he's signing, he's paying. or
Usually
she's
the
paying.
people that pay for something want that.
So yeah, absolutely. But let's say that person who's in charge doesn't want to, we would have them come in and
sign
sign
away.
something. Who are you giving this to? And does that person know and have signatures? Yeah.
Hey Ben, interesting question. Just in the back of my mind, has there ever been like fights over like remains? Like, you know, who should
absolutely.
get them?
Absolutely.
You know, I want 25%. I know it sounds really like, but like, how do you do that?
Well, look, I mean, the times and where we're at, Nick, everything has been sued or fought
Yeah.
over. I mean, in general, in my situation, no, because the person that's signing is usually one that's paying.
Mm-hmm.
And usually that is never an issue, or they at least have the respect for the others to say, can we get a little bit and give it to, because that's the other thing about cremation. There's ashes. So you can give an eighth to your sister or a little bit to put in a necklace for somebody else. Best thing about cremation, there's so much you can do with cremation.
It's like the Jeep.
Worst thing you can do with cremation, there's so much you can do with cremation. So what we tell them is, even if you go and you buy, first of all, we tell them if you buy a necklace, this is for everybody out there, if you buy a necklace that holds cremation, do yourself a favor and go out and actually buy a nice chain to go with it.
Oh, yeah.
The problem with the necklaces are usually, and I'm not saying this for every company, but the necklaces are a little dinky, and you do not want to lose mom's cremains because it got pulled off.
Yeah, and that would, if that's the only thing you got.
So
Yeah.
what I suggest is go out and buy a nice chain. So, Nick, I think it's about that time, about that Q&A time.
Let's do it.
Q&A, everyone loves that Q&A.
All right, Nick, this is the first question. It's titled The Guilt Question. How can someone help someone else get past the guilt of saying something to a person before they die and living with the guilt for 27 years after?
I think I'd start with this. If you knew that day, that time, that moment, that they were going to die, would you have said that? And if you knew they were going to die and you say to me, no, I would have never said that. That is the reality, right?
Right.
We as human beings love to think we have power and control. We have no power and no control over what happens. That is just what life is. If you would have known Paul was going to die after you said something nasty to him, you would have never done that.
Right.
But we don't have that power.
And
We don't have that ability to know what time is going to have in store for us. We do not have that.
And that's a good lesson, Nick, from then on. Realize that may be the last thing you say to
But I'm
people.
also going to stop you and say that we are also human. And people are going to make you upset. People are going to do things that you don't like or don't agree with. And it's okay to feel how you feel. Realize most of the time, if Paul knew he was going to die and you said that to him, he probably would tell you, hey, I really don't want that to be the last memory you told me.
Don't we all
right?
wish we had that?
But here's the thing. Paul didn't have that control.
You might
Paul
want to
has
rephrase
none of that.
what you said.
And I'm not trying to bring
Got
this
about
to
10
humor,
minutes left here
But reality is this. We know what we know, and we live how we live in the moment.
Absolutely.
So in that moment, you were super angry, and you said, screw you, Paul, right?
Screw you.
Unfortunately, that might be the last thing you said to Paul.
Absolutely.
If people truly love you, they don't let one thing you said ruin their relationship. They are able to hear you out. Unfortunately, the problem is that for people that do say something and then someone dies, is that there's no hearing out stage. Right? That doesn't necessarily mean that person didn't go around their day and thought, wow, Nick must have been really upset to say that to me. I hope he's okay. And then he dies, right? Maybe this person wasn't even mad at me.
No, right. You're overthinking
maybe this person
it. You're
was like,
absolutely
okay.
or I
weird.
kind of deserved that because I was
right. And that's what I'm saying
kind
to
of
you
a
is like
beehole.
we have no control over how people feel about us.
Right. And I'll say this is a question we get, Dad and I get all the time too, and I'm going to flip it. This one is something that they said, what about something I didn't say that
Beautiful.
I wish I would have said?
Beautiful.
And now I'm dealing with that for 27 years.
And I'm going to throw it back to we know what we know
When
at
we
the
know.
moment. We know what we know.
No, someone just
know.
said it was brilliant. We only know what we know, and it's such a small thing, but it's completely true.
That's what's so beautiful about human.
Right, that's what makes life so important and makes it so beautiful is that we don't have the answer to death.
And we also know
I mean,
that-
Nick and Benny have the answer to death.
I
but-
wish we did, man. I always say that to clients all the time. I wish I had that wand where I could just point it at you.
Wand? Magical wand? What are you,
and
Harry
just be
Potter
like,
over there? This is a big question everybody asks. I
No, but
wish I would have said something. I
think
wish
the
I didn't
thing-
say something.
I think the thing is that I always say to my clients, and I think this is the most important thing, whether someone's going to die or not die, it doesn't matter. The most important thing is being present.
Right.
Be here and now, whether that's at a funeral, whether that's at the person's a deathbed, or maybe that's at Christmas or a holiday. Just be there.
I have seen of ways that you can cleanse yourself of this past undoing. Some people they take a piece of paper and they write down exactly what was done or said, right? and then they spiritually, like, they can burn that piece of paper, like, and it goes out, and the smoke that rises is supposed to be, it's done. It's been sent out. I cannot change that day. I wish I could, but I can't change that day. This is something I can concretely do. Say that I'm sorry, let it out, and let it go. We got another question here, Nick. You want to read it?
Love this idea for a podcast. And the pairing of a fourth-generation death professional and a psychotherapist is phenomenal. All the better that you're brothers.
Doctor.
I'm a doctor now. Well, I'm not a psychotherapist. I'm a psychologist. But that changed. Anyways, besides the point, we're moving on. That out of the way, I actually have a question. My wife and I have decided we do not wish to have the waste and expense of a traditional burial and are both wanting some form of non-burial final resting, either cremation or one of the hydro methods. Again, an emphasis on the minimal environmental impact and land waste. What options are available? Should these be paired with traditional wake/funeral style rites? And what are some cool ways to have one's remain once done in this fashion, either legally spread, fun, we'll go into that, or put into urn or artwork? I like the artwork. That's creative. Ben, what do you think?
Okay, so the first thing about it is, before we go into the ways of the disposition, cremation, burial, water hydrolysis, all that.
We'll go with it. Yep.
You asked the question, should you have something before? And I absolutely, I'm 100%, you need to do what your family needs. Like I said, realize this is for you and your wife, but you got to think of your kids, their kids possibly down the line. They may need still a visitation or something, memorial gathering, to at least do a good, proper send-off in their journey through grief. I have the experience of a lot of people saying, I wish there was something, whether it was small, whether it was big, they just needed some place to say their goodbye. So that's my first answer to that question. The second question is, there is a lot of cool ways. I like cool. That's interesting. I like that because that puts a positive spin on death, which I think is awesome. I've always been a positive death thinker. So yeah, there is cremation. There's obviously burial. There is the new hydrolysis. There's actually a new way that's coming out of Washington that I heard that you can literally be turned into mulch within like a very fast time. And it's through like acidic soil. Really cool. Green burials can be done. They just need to be done in certain places. Just like scattering. Nick brought it up and you brought it up in your question. There's only a couple legal ways you can spread your ashes. Now, you have your own property. You can do whatever you want with your ashes on your property. But let this be a disclaimer to everybody who wants to bury their urn on their property. Realize someday you might sell that property, and the person who owns that house does not have to keep your cremains and your tombstone in their backyard. So realize they might dig it up and call you, which Dad and I have had this experience, so we can tell you this, that you have 24 hours to come and grab your loved one, or I'm literally putting them in the trash. So think about where you're doing. That's another thing, too. We've had we're from Michigan, so everybody here is hunters. They have their Shangri-La up north. A lot of people, which is illegal, I have to say this because this is not legal to scatter your cremains in a national park or in a pond or in water unless it's owned by a cemetery that gives you permission to do so. Realize you could get a fine, and if you're a funeral director and helping do this, you could lose your license. Just something to think about. There are cemeteries that have certain ponds that you may have to pay, you may not have to pay to scatter your loved one at a pond. They have certain areas where you can spread your ashes, but that is done legally through a cemetery. The reason being is this. A lot of people love to spread their ashes at lakes, right? Somebody may not want Uncle Louie's cremains as they're swimming with their kids downstream. So that's something to think about, too, is if you're going to do cremains and you're going to be scattered, make sure that it's legally done and the proper method. And it's not like the movies. You don't just release the ashes and they swiftly go in the area that make sure you know what the wind is going And if you're doing it on a
And
boat,
don't keep your mouth open when you do it.
this is
Some
from
horror stories.
professional experience that we've heard horror stories. If you're doing it on a boat, make sure before you even open that urn or box, you have everything on the outside of the boat. Yep. Because we've heard of horror stories where all the cremains ended up in the boat, and then they had to clean the boat out, and they felt very weird about that. So that's the thing.
Well, make sure that you subscribe. Make sure you love us. Love us.
Like
Not
us.
like us, but love
review us.
Love us.
Star us.
Star us. 5 stars. Come on.
Leave some comments. Leave some messages. If
At
you want to
least
DM
4.5
us.
stars.
These are awesome questions. These are from you. We're literally pulled these out from questions from you. So please feel free to Gmail us at letstalkaboutdeathpod@gmail.com or direct message us through Facebook, Instagram. Send Nick your favorite playlist.
Yeah, please. Favorite song?
Any ideas how to become cooler?
be a
Because
good
he needs
episode.
that. What? Do you free to become cooler?
Song for funerals.
Songs for funerals. We'll do that
Let's
next
do
time.
that one. That sounds good.
Thank you for listening.
Love you all.